So we start with this discussion. There's mixed reactions or views on a bill from the US that could lead to sanctions against key South African government officials. Let's unpack this for you with a senior research associate at the Institute for Global Dialogue in Sanusha Naidu, who joins us now via our video link. Sanusha, it's great to see you. Thanks very much indeed for your time. And so much has been said about this proposed piece of legislation. And because of all the noise, I wonder if you and I can start by just placing where we are insofar as getting this piece of legislation through the line, so to speak.
Good morning, and good morning to your viewers. Right now, it has been passed by the House of Representatives in terms of the legislation or the proposed bill being presented to the House of Representative members, and they passed it by, at the last I saw, was 34 to 16 votes. Now it goes to Congress, and it goes to Senate and Congress, and then before that, it'll have to go through the same kind of voting process. What I'm told, and I don't know, I stand corrected on this, but what I'm told is that the margins or the majority of margins in the Congress and in the Senate is slightly smaller than it was in the House of Representatives. So the question is, will it get the kind of majority support? Will it actually be narrowly passed? Will it not be passed? So that's where we are right now. And then once it goes through that process, and if it does get passed by Senate and Congress, then it gets presented to the president to sign or enact into law. So right now we are sitting with a situation where that proposed bill that has been passed by the House of Representatives is still a proposed bill. It's not, there's no immediate action that's going to be taken against South Africa. There's no immediate implementation of this proposal being enacted against South Africa quite yet. But the question would be is what happens between now until the Senate and the Congress vote, and how that will play out.
Yeah, and I'm told that's likely to happen in September, that particular vote. But it all began, I think, back in April this year with this piece of legislation being tabled by a Republican congressman called Ronnie Jackson. I wonder if, there's anything we actually know about him and whether that could kind of give some kind of insight into why the US in particular has taken this particular direction.
Well, I think it goes further than that. It actually goes back to some of these issues being ventilated in the Biden administration. And the question about South Africa's relationship with countries like China, Russia, Iran, but also I think it's part of what has happened domestically in terms of how this has now become cottoned on by the Trump presidency in terms of the kind of tenuous relations that South Africa has with Washington under the Trump presidency. But even under the Biden administration, it was very much about, remember the Lady R saga. Remember the question of the previous ambassador Brickety, Ruben Brickety, who raised the Lady R issue with regard to South Africa, perhaps contravening international law and violating international law around the selling of arms to Russia. That was discussed. That was put under a microscope through the Commission of Inquiry that found no evidence to the allegations that were put forward. So this is not necessarily something that's just happening because of a particular senator or a particular representative in the US Congress. I think it's been in the making for a while, particularly because it also plays to constituency. I don't know much about the proposal who has put this bill forward, but it also plays to constituency politics in the US. So we're kind of navigating very, very difficult and very challenging structural conditions both in the US and in South Africa. So you've got constituencies in the US who may also be wanting to push for trying to bait South Africa into some kind of concessions around perhaps commercial transactions, issues around their access to the market in South Africa, which has been cited as being difficult due to legislation like employment equity, black economic empowerment, the broad-based black economic empowerment legislation, and that has really been some of those sore points and those sensitive points. It also links back to the fact that you have people like, or groups like AfriForum and Solidarity, who have gone to the US trying to use this leverage, but then of course have realized that the leverage could come back and hurt them. So it's all of these different kind of issues that are playing out in this push and pull kind of architecture. And I think it's not just about what this bill does, but it's really also a kind of ecosystem of proposed legislation that's coming out in the US that's not just about South Africa. It's also about the misalignment of legislation or proposed legislation in the US around China. I think it was earlier in May, or somewhere in May, or maybe somewhere in June, there was a congressional hearing about the review of or the misalignment legislation or engagement with China. So it seems to be that it's not just South Africa, and it's not basically only about South Africa, but it seems to be a bigger ecosystem that is unfolding in the congressional context. And the drivers of this is really this question about us having sovereign relations with Iran, China, and Russia. But I think it's much bigger than that. I think it has to do with economic and commercial issues as well.
If it's not just about South Africa, I suppose the question then becomes, what, if anything, can South Africa do about it?
That's a hard question to answer, because I think the challenge is all of South Africa's interventions, the proposed mechanics and interventions that it would like to pursue in terms of engaging with the US Congress and engaging with the US administration around what the implications are if this proposed legislation gets passed and gets signed into law. It won't just hurt South Africa. I think it will also hurt the US. But right now, it's very difficult to have that kind of rational engagement or talk where one side is just looking at it in a very kind of parochial manner. And that's the US, because they're seeing this in a manner that is really about how the US is using its unilateralism to goad countries and push countries into what they want. And so as much as you have this contradiction around this, so I think it's a difficulty for the South African side, because the South African side has to now try to convince the members of Congress and convince perhaps even the senators and and congressional members in before September, that this is not going to make sense. But the problem here, Ayanda, is that there's a lot of irrationality. So how do you deal with irrationality through a rational context? And I don't know whether it's possible, because right now we're sitting in that kind of very precarious architecture. And so the challenge would be is whether you are able to use other pockets of engagements, other avenues of engagement, where, for example, to implore on US business to say, well, you know what, guys, if you're going to actually be also affected by this bill, it's not just about whether whether the bill it comes out and then makes South Africa a pariah in the international system. It has many different implications. If the sanctions are to be carried out, and we know that sanctions are not a foolproof mechanism or an intervention or a punitive tool that can actually make a change situations. But if it is to be carried out, it's not just the members of the ANC that are being cited as part of this. It affects business. It affects workers. In fact, it will actually affect the very constituencies that Solidarity and AfriForum are representing, because then it will mean that that those people in those constituencies, whether it's farm workers, whether it's farmers, will start losing market access, losing product, losing access to export. And I think they should have thought about this before they went on this kind of process, because it's not going to hurt only ordinary South Africans or the ANC, it's going to hurt everybody.
Right. As you said, it's really difficult to kind of even piece together what the thinking is. Sanusha Naidu, thanks for helping us try and understand what's taking place, given just how unprecedented all of this is. Sanusha Naidu is a senior research associate with the Institute for Global Dialogue. Once again, thanks very much indeed.